she had a couple questions. So, that's it. She can she's Brian Tillman does most. Still there. Yeah. And then this is set for stuff. Well, lead you down to it if you couldn't find it on your own. While we get coffee, we can lots of the same thing. And that's 10:45 or whatever. So,
Hello.
how are you? I'm Ben.
Oh, Whitney Skurlock. I'm the one that sort of put all this together.
The name sounds from Lee Elliott.
Nice to meet you. I'm excited. I was skimming through the presentation.
Good. We'll try to make it quick.
Well, fortunately,
exciting.
our hearing is done for the day, so
really?
we thought we were going to have to go back to that. Hey,
Well, that's really good then.
it works out pretty well.
Where are you all sitting? I want to.
Well, I think we're just going to sit back here.
Okay,
I'll
I'm
be
in.
up there.
All right, perfect. Do you mind if I sit here? Whitney, were you sitting here?
It's up to you. I'm good either way. I can scoot over here to the
I'm
corner.
just trying to stay off the camera.
Yeah, that's what Rodney was telling us too. That's right.
I'm just laying claim to something.
Okay. Sarah,
Hey,
nice to meet you. I'm Lauren. Good to meet you. I'm Virgie.
Lee Elliott.
Hi,
You
nice
used to be
meet
over at FR.
That's right.
I was there the last time before COVID hit.
Oh, yeah. I think that would have been probably the last time I was here. Too.
Yes, it was. It was your going away. So
Yeah.
that was Colette was on her.
Yeah. It's nice to meet you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Beautiful day outside. Take a lot of these.
Hi, Wendy.
Good morning. He just it's just outside the hallway.
I'll just ask.
I think so. I think we're good to go. Hi. Oh, there it is.
Two-minute call.
Morning, Mr. Chair.
I didn't know you were here too.
Coming to the hearing.
What hearing's over?
Sure.
For today.
I missed it.
It's nice to see you, Sarah.
Does this red mean it's on mute?
Yeah.
No, let's have.
So to hit the bar?
Are we good over? Like, are we muted on here? Or
Is
Yeah,
that-
we're using the STEM for
This
the WebEx call
Okay.
because the guys are presenting off-site, so we're actually using the STEM. But yeah, it's on right now.
So even though this is a red bar, it's
That's muted.
that's muted.
That's muted. This is not at the moment. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm here.
Hey, that's awesome, so am I. Hey, fellas, how is everybody?
The agenda meeting will start in 2 minutes.
Commissioner Coleman and Commissioner Holzman.
Haven't heard.
Optimistic too much.
Holzman's here.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Physically, she was here yesterday.
Yeah.
I think she felt spurned. She wasn't recognized.
Send your way.
Do what now? This is a
Fruit bug.
it's a Herbalife tea. Daughter has a shop.
Commissioner Coleman is here.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
We can go right at 10:15. It's a nutrition club. In the strip mall and come in and buy some shakes and teas.
She has one in the mall. Is it like in the mall? Like a kiosk?
It's a strip mall. It's like right next to a gym.
Oh yeah.
It's actually right between a gym and a chiropractor. So it's like
Perfect, yeah.
seems like your target market.
When she opened.
She soft opened a couple weeks ago. She's gonna do the grand opening in like a week or two when her big sign gets out.
Nice. Where's that?
Platte County, like over by Zeller's. All right, it's 10:15 and all the commissioners are here, so we will go ahead and call the agenda meeting to order. Ask those on the phone, please mute your phone unless you need to speak. We have 5 tariffs and new orders today, along with a discussion item regarding publications and then a presentation from SPP. So first up is to approve the minutes from August 24th's agenda. You all have seen those. Are there any additions or corrections? All right, hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from August 24th, say aye.
Aye.
Those minutes are approved 5-0. Up in tariffs and new orders, first today is file number EO 2022-0362. This is in the matter of Union Electric Company, DBA Ameren, Missouri's notice of a change to its preferred resource plan. Ameren filed a notice according to our IRP rule that it has determined it's necessary to retire the Rush Island plant to comply with a federal court requirement. So no further action is necessary at this time. So I recommend that we approve this order to close the file, and that will be version 1. Commissioner Root?
I am in support.
Commissioner Coleman?
I support the order.
Commissioner Holzman?
I support the order.
Commissioner Kochmeyer?
And I do as well.
All right, all those in favor of approving the order as drafted version 1 say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Order is approved 5-0. Next up, file number EO 2022-0283. This is in the matter of Union Electric Company, DBA Ameren, Missouri's filing of the Renewable Energy Standard Compliance Plan and Renewable Energy Compliance Report pursuant to 20 CSR 4240-20.100. So Ameren filed its res plan and compliance report. Staff filed a recommendation that it did not find deficiencies in its review, except for a misstatement in the Missouri jurisdictional revenue in the compliance report. So Ameren filed a corrected report, and no party has filed a response to that. So this rule does not require any further action on our part, so I recommend that we approve this order, closing this file, version 2. Commissioner Root?
I am in support.
Commissioner Coleman?
I support the order.
Commissioner Holzman?
I support the order.
Commissioner Goldmeyer?
And I am as well.
All right, all those in favor of approving the order as drafted version 2 say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Order is approved 5-0. Next up, file number WA 2022-0293. This is in the matter of the application of Missouri American Water Company for a certificate of convenience and necessity authorizing it to install, own, acquire, construct, operate, control, manage, and maintain a water and sewer system in and around the city of Purcell. Missouri American filed its application for a CCN to acquire the water and sewer assets of the city of Purcell, which is in Jasper County. Staff filed a recommendation to approve the request with certain conditions. OPC proposed that Missouri American provide a post-closing notice to customers informing them of the outcome of the acquisition. So this order grants the CCN with staff's proposed conditions and OPC's post-closing notice. It also waives the 60-day notice requirement and grants expedited treatment. So with that, I recommend we approve this order version 1. Commissioner Roop?
I am in support.
Commissioner Coleman?
I support the order.
Commissioner Holzman?
I'm in support of the order.
Commissioner Coltmeyer?
And I am as well.
All right, all those in favor of approving the order as drafted version 1 say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Order is approved 5-0. Next up, file number EE 2023-0081. This is in the matter of Evergy Missouri West, Inc., DBA Evergy Missouri West's request for a waiver of the rules and regulations, Chapter 8, Electric Power and Energy Curtailment Plan. Evergy West filed this request for a waiver from portions of its tariff involving its electric power and energy curtailment plan and asked for expedited treatment so that any decision would be effective no later than September 9th. It says a waiver is necessary until the Commission has an opportunity to issue a decision regarding revised tariff provisions in Evergy's general rate case. Staff recommends denial of the request, and OPC suggests the filing of a procedural schedule. So due to the motion's failure to justify why we need an accelerated treatment of this, the order denies Evergy West's request for expedited treatment and directs the parties to file a proposed procedural schedule as was suggested by OPC. So with that, I recommend we approve this order version 1. Commissioner Root?
I am supporting this order.
Commissioner Coleman?
I support the order.
Commissioner Holzman?
I support the order.
Commissioner Coltmeyer?
I'm also in support.
All right, all those in favor of approving the order as drafted version 1 say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Order is approved 5-0. Final order today is file number EE 2022-0329. This is in the matter of Union Electric Company, DBA Ameren Missouri's request for a waiver from tariff sheets 146 through 150. Ameren filed proposed tariff sheets to comply with our previous order, directing it to file permanent modifications to its tariff. It filed substitute tariff sheets to address concerns of staff and OPC, to which no party has objected. So I recommend that we approve this order approving the tariff sheets version 1. Commissioner Root?
I am in support.
Commissioner Coleman?
I support the order.
Commissioner Holzman?
I support the order.
Commissioner Coltmeyer?
And I am as well.
All right, all those in favor of approving the order as drafted version 1 say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That order is approved 5-0. That concludes reports and orders today. We do have, as I mentioned, a brief other discussion with Judge Woodruff on publications.
Yes, this is the publication list for July, August, and September of last year of 2021. And as we routinely do these, and this is the list of publications that are of orders that I believe should be published. And we would need an order from the commission, or a vote from the commission to publish these.
Okay. You all have seen the order suggested for publication. Does anyone have anything they would like to add or remove? All right, hearing none, I'll make the motion to go ahead and approve the list. Is there a second?
I second Coleman.
We were having a stare down in the room, Commissioner Coleman, so thank you for the second. Any discussion?
They're shy all of a sudden.
They were glaring across the table at each other to see who was going to flinch. All right, any discussion on the motion to approve the list? All right, hearing none, all those in favor of approving the list for publication for July, August, and September of 22, say aye.
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 That motion's approved 5-0. This is approved, Judge. Thank you. Next order of business is the presentation from SVP. please join us at the table.
All right. For those of y'all in the room, we do have some handouts if you like, so.
We can slide these around.
All right, good morning. My name is Ben Bright. I'm with the regulatory group at SPP, and I appreciate the time coming today. So we have a short presentation. We thought we would just go through a little bit of background of SPP. Probably been a while since we've been here. Probably have some new folks, so we do that. And then we'd also like to spend some time talking about some new resource adequacy policies that have been approved at SPP over the last 30 days. So, the Missouri Commission's been a long, active part in the SPP stakeholder process. We have Commissioner Roop, who's been on the RSC now for 4 years, almost 5. It's been a while. So we have Adam McKinney, who is the longest standing member of our cost allocation working group. And we appreciate his leadership in that group. Walt does a lot with resource adequacy in the SPP footprint, and Rodney helps out quite a bit on policy matters for both the COG and the RSC. So with me today, I have Lee Elliott, who's an analyst, a regulatory relations analyst in our group, and also Charles Hendricks should be on the phone. That's going to talk some more about the resource adequacy piece. So just we move on to to this slide here. Just a little bit about SPP. We were established in 1941, so we're not a new organization. We've been around, or we're headquartered in Little Rock, Arkansas. We have around 640 budgeted positions with SPP. It's the typical jobs you would think in an RTO. Lots of IT people, lots of engineering people, operations people who manage the grid, settlements, and then just all the supporting positions that help those guys. We do have a 24/7 operation. We do have a fully redundant backup operations site within about 20 minutes of our campus in Little Rock. Some of the major services that we provide, facilitation, we do have an active number of stakeholder groups. Reliability coordination, we are managing the grid to make sure that we're on top of any issues that may be happening on the grid. A consolidated balancing authority, a transmission service, and tariff administration, so a one-stop shop for people to have access to the electric system. We do run a number of markets, both in the East and some contract markets in the Western footprint of the U.S. And then we do transmission planning, and we have a large training operation as well. The next slide is just a map of the RTO ISOs in North America. There are 9. We are the sort of red, brown, maroon, right there in smack dab in the middle of the U.S. That's SPP's footprint. So we're uniquely situated where to the west of us, we have a border with the DC ties and the Western Interconnect. And to the east, we have a pretty long seam with MISO. So we do a lot of coordination with MISO. A little bit more detailed of our operating territory. So we're in all or part of 14 states, around 550,000 square miles, service a population of about a little under 18 million. So I think we have probably one of the larger operating areas of any of the RTOs, ISOs, but we also have one of the smaller populations that we serve.
Why is your North Dakota shaded here?
We share. So we have members that have facilities in SPP and MISO.
Okay.
So we both have members in North Dakota. Yeah.
Okay.
Same as Missouri.
Okay.
Yep. There's about 70,000 miles of transmission under the SPP tariff. We're about a 53 gigawatt summer peak system, about 44 gigawatt winter peaking system. I think all of those peaks have been set in the last 24 months. I think we set 3 or 4 summer peaks.
There's always not as yes.
3 or 4 summer peaks this summer, and as you can imagine, 2021 was a good winter peak setter for us. We do have 113 member entities of SPP, have a wide variety of types of members. As you can see here, number of G&T co-ops, independent power producers, investor-owned utilities, municipal systems, independent transmission providers. I will say we'll mention that we do have the one federal agency, the Western Area Power Authority, WAPA. They are a federal system, and I think we are the only RTO that does have a federal agency as part of our RTO.
And one other comment on there, you'll see state agencies. Nebraska has a public power districts. It's not a public service commission agency or a state agency, as you'd imagine. That's a public power district, and that's why you'll see on there the state agencies. Most of them are in the state of Nebraska.
Yep.
We often get questions about state agencies being a member.
So that's a little bit about who SPP is and sort of some of the services we provide. I'm going to turn it over to Lee. He's going to talk about the importance of our regional state committee.
Our regional state committee is made up of 12 states. In order to be a member of the regional state committee, you must have oversight of either the electric rates or siting of transmission. As you'll see, President Randy Chrisman is our current president of the RSC. That is a one-year term. The RSC is an independent organization within SPP. They have their own budget. They have their own bylaws. They elect their own leadership of the RSC. And as we'll talk about here in a few minutes, the 4 authorities that are granted to the RSC from SPP's bylaws is unique to an RTO. SPP is one of the few that has that. Those authorities given there, and with those authorities comes a lot of responsibility, as we've seen this past quarter that we're talking about here today in SPP. The 4 authorities that we have as part of the RSC is cost allocation, which you'll see has been used 12 times. In the past, that was probably the most times that they used that authority was under cost allocation. Under resource adequacy, we just exercised that authority 2 times this past quarter, which doubled the number of times that resource adequacy is. And as you guys are very familiar with, the resource adequacy is becoming more and more important for RTOs as we go there. So I see resource adequacy being used more often than we have in the past. There are 2 other authorities. One is financial transmission rights. If you have many questions about financial transmission rights, that's not for me. That's the market and the hedging that they would do with those financial transmission rights. And the other is planning for remote resources. One thing I'll share with that. Originally, this was put underneath the RSC authority when wind was new to the system, which today, it's what we do every day. But originally, when these authorities were granted through the SPP bylaws, planning for remote resources for the most part was how do we get wind on the system? How do we do that effectively? And so that's why that's underneath the authorities of the RSC. One of the reasons, I would say the global reason for the authorities that were granted to the RSC was that these are things that impact your ratepayers. And we felt like the commissioners need to have a voice in things that impact the end user and the ratepayers within those states. Very important. The last thing I will say about the RSC authority, these authorities, if the RSC passes any motions or anything that would affect the tariff or any other things, what is passed by the RSC must be filed at FERC. Even if the SPP board of directors and stakeholders disagree under these authorities, we don't have the option of filing what we want as SPP or our stakeholders want. We file what the RSC has passed and what must be underneath a 205 filing. I think that's very important within SPP and how important our regulators are within SPP. And once again, Commissioner Roop, I appreciate your leadership on what we've done over the past 2 years has been really tough on us, and I appreciate your leadership there. One thing I'll say about the cost allocation working group, this is made up of staff members from each commission. They have one designated person. However, with Missouri, as we've talked about, we appreciate the opportunities that Walt's provided us and Rodney has, as well as Adam. The cost allocation group, the way I look at it, is it's like commission staff. They meet monthly, advance policies and work for the RSC and present to the RSC to make the tough decisions. But they do the analytics of it and the work there for policies that fall underneath their authority. I was trying to see.
Can you tell if he's on?
I can't. Charles Hendricks, are you on?
There he is.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Charles. Charles Hendricks.
Oh, yeah, I'll just mention Charles is our manager of reliability assurance. And so does a lot of work in the resource adequacy area, and so we thought it'd be a good idea to have him come and present our new policies and answer any questions you guys may have.
And I would just ask, do we have any questions up to this point, since we're going to make this transition? Commissioner, anything you'd like?
No, you guys
Okay.
doing great.
Charles?
Thanks, Lee. Hi, good morning. Charles Hendricks here, Manager of Reliability Assurance. I want to talk to you a little bit about a couple of recent policy changes in the resource adequacy process that the RSC was involved with. So the first one is what we're calling performance-based accreditation for thermal resources. So there's been a lot of the discussion about wind and solar, a lot of the impact on that. But we've also determined that in the future, thermal resources, conventional resources will also still have an important role. The current accreditation was determined to be looked at, to get better reliability from our gas and coal resources. So currently, the resource adequacy process, the units are accredited based on a capability test that's run every 5 years, and then it's verified through an operational test every year. So, what that unit has been demonstrated to be able to operate at for that capability test, that generally sets the accreditation. We have not taken into account how that resource actually performed. So, in theory, it could run 1 hour of the year and, not run the rest of the year, but it gets that accreditation. I mean, we haven't had that issue, but that's the theory of worst case scenario. So we don't look at, however, we do take into account when we're setting the planning reserve margin, we look at the actual outages that those units have had that helps set our planning reserve margin. And so considering that, to back up, that would, changing that, we would actually be able to consider the performance of each resource, based on its performance. And what's important there to realize is even though, we include all that with the LOLE study, with the planning reserve margin, is that those outages are more or less captured in the planning reserve margin. So it's more, no matter how many outages each generator has, it gets spread evenly as a requirement among all the load serving entities. Okay, next slide. So what is performance-based accreditation? It will differentiate the generators according to their reliability performance. So those generators that have better performance, don't have as many outages, they're actually going to get better relative accreditation. Those that have worse performing generators, they'll get less relative accreditation than what they get now. It will impact different entities differently. If you have a very good performing fleet, you're going to have excess capacity compared to what you used to. And likewise, if your fleet hasn't performed well in the past, you're going to need to get more capacity. Now, initially, it will not change the total capacity that's required. Because what it's going to do is we set that PRM as we do now, and we basically allocate out those outages. Those become the generator's responsibility, and not the responsibility on the PRM. The hope is in the future, once this will kind of, a rising tide will lift all boats, that everybody's generators will start performing better, and then it will actually decrease the need for capacity on the system. Next slide. So the benefits of performance-based accreditation, it's going to value conventional resources that are reliable and available to perform when they're most needed. And as I said earlier, it's going to incent underperforming resources to improve. So if you've got steel in the ground that's not, that is not performing, and you're basically not getting capacity for it, you're going to perform the necessary maintenance to get that unit to performing up to snuff. And it ensures that we have appropriate capacity value available for the PRM, and provides capability to meet our system needs. So through the stakeholder discussions, there was concerns that this is kind of a big jolt because right now conventional resources is still over 90% of the resource fleet in SPP. So this would kind of be a big jolt to the system. So we've kind of set the slate clean here and are going for a 4-year phase-in so that everybody can kind of get their maintenance, plan their maintenance correctly, get it on order. So it'll be a little, in the next 4 years, the PRM is going to be a little hard to determine what's going on with the PRM because when we implement performance-based accreditation, the PRM is actually going to decrease a bit because we're going to be taking some of that PRM out, some of those outages out of the PRM and applying it to the generator. So the PRM will decrease from that perspective, and it will do so over this phase-in period. But then, as you know, and I'll discuss here in a later, we've actually raised the ICAP PRM, so we've raised the base PRM that this will be decrementing against. So this will be a little confusing, at least for the next few years.
Charles, if I can interrupt you real quick, for those of you, he's used the term PRM a couple of times, and I apologize, Charles, already. I'm going to use non-engineering terms. You're going to tell me it's not 100% right, so I'm going to say it that way. The planning reserve margin is a percentage, what I call inventory, in case there's something that unexpected happens on the network. We've got other extra capacity, extra product to put on there to make sure that the system stays in sync. Ben calls it overdraft protection. That you've got an overdraft protection there in case something happens that you're not expecting to happen on the system. You have extra generation available to make that up so that you don't have load shedding events and things of that nature. I just thought I'd jump in there real quick, Charles, because you've used PRM a couple of times, and that's leading to our next discussion. But want to make sure we all understood that it's just extra generation that we might need for unexpected outages or anything that might occur on the system. And Charles, that's the layman's term. So I know as an engineer, some people might be shaking a little bit on that definition.
Now that works fine. This did go through the stakeholder process, went through all our usual working groups and committees, and it did go up to the regional state committee. We had, it shows the votes there, unanimous from the RSC. We did have a little bit of opposition on the members committee. I think we may have had more opposition earlier on in the working groups, but it gained better consensus by the time it got to the members committee and to the board of directors. So a big part of that was the transition that kind of helped spur the passage of that. Okay, now to the planning reserve margin. Yes, I will throw PRM out a lot. That's the planning reserve margin. So what is the planning reserve margin? So it's designed to be the amount of generating capacity necessary reliably to serve the forecasted peak demand and set to meet this reliability target. So as you mentioned, we have a 50-50 load forecast. So there's a 50% chance of that load forecast being exceeded. With all the generation on the system, where at any given time we have quite a few outages, as we just discussed. Hopefully those outages will be going down, but you will have upwards of 5,000 megawatts of generation on outage at any given time. But on particular days that could be really high. So we have that margin set to accommodate that. The current industry best practice standard for LOLE or for setting the planning reserve margin is a loss of load of no more than 1 day in 10 years. It's called loss of load expectation, LOLE, 1 in 10. But you may have heard that before. But even as you say, well, that's still 1 day in 10 years, and you never know when that 1 day is going to happen. But that's what we set it at. To set that at 0, it becomes that PRM, that capacity really does start to increase quite a bit and that metric was set back a long time ago, as a measurement of risk that the industry was willing to take. Next slide. So before the action that we'll talk about from the RC, we had a 12% annual requirement. So for each utility, what we call load responsible entity, they would determine their forecasted peak, which is like I say, a 50% chance of being exceeded, a 50% chance of not getting that high. And then you add, the capacity margin, the reserve margin would be 12% of that. So if you had a 1,000 megawatt forecast, and then you'd have to provide an extra 120 megawatts of capacity to meet that requirement. I just touched on loss of load expectation. We use that. That goes through our supply adequacy working group to help us set the scope. SPP staff runs the analysis every 2 years. So we have an enforceable requirement in the resource adequacy process, which is, as I mentioned, that load plus PRM. So in that example, that LRE would need to actually show SPP that, hey, I've got 1,120 megawatts of capacity that's going to be ready this summer. And if there's not, then there's actually a deficiency payment for being short. Currently, we don't have this requirement for the winter. It's in the tariff. It's called an obligation. Doesn't have the deficiency payment mechanism, but Supply Adequacy Working Group is meeting right now as I speak, and we are actually talking about moving this requirement to include summer and winter.
So, Charles, if I could real quick.
Slide.
Charles, real quick, if I could, going back to the RSC authorities, what he's talking about on the winter obligation will eventually work its way through to the RSC and the COG to make sure that they approve that as well. We talk about resource adequacy again, as I said earlier, on the authorities of the RSC. That's where this ties in. This is the stakeholder process and the RSC working together for us. So that will be coming to RSC at some point in the future. Thanks, Charles.
That's correct. Yes. Okay, so what are the drivers and risk of the planning reserve margin? So they actually, they changed. The original metric was set, I think it was set back in the 60s, but things are obviously changing. Everybody knows we're seeing more wind and solar, influx of renewables, and both those wind and solar resources and eventually storage. You'll see a lot of volatility associated with those resources. At the same time, earlier, we were adding a lot of wind in SPP. It was primarily for energy. You weren't seeing as many retirements, but the retirements have started picking up probably in the last 5 years or so. So the wind and solar that we're putting on now, it's actually having more, we're depending on it more for capacity rather than energy. We've seen increased probability of outages to the conventional fleet. That was part of the reason why we've looked harder at the performance-based accreditation on conventionals. There's lots of reasons for that. One of the reasons is, some of these gas units are having to cycle up and down many more times during the day than they used to, because as the wind's blowing, they'll cycle down. As the wind drops, they'll cycle back up, and that can be tough on a conventional unit. So it's tough on the main. They'll break down more, so we have to have more maintenance on them. Changing load shapes and volatility. So this is probably still yet to come, with electrification. Right now, we're used to the usual peak in the summer, peak at each day in the middle of the day. As we see more electrification, more electric cars, we expect that loads at night will start increasing. And we may have more issues serving load at night rather than in just the middle of the day. Solar as well. Solar is going to perform well in the middle of the day, but then in summer, July evenings when it's still nice and warm at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the evening, and summer has disappeared. Solar, is not there. There's going to be a big gap there. So those are the kind of things we're dealing with on the changing load shapes. And then persistent operational issues that we've had, really that's kind of been driven by all these issues here. So this is kind of just illustrating, the retirements we've talked about. A lot of this is, the load hasn't increased that greatly the last few years in SPP, but this margin, what you see here, it's the margin over your forecasted load. But what we're seeing here is, load's going to be increasing slightly, but we're seeing more retirements as well. So in the past, we've had a large margin on the SPP system in excess of 30%, and we had determined we only needed 12. So as there's been retirement, so this margin has been declining over the years. But at the same time, it's changing over to wind and solar. So now we're determining that 12% is not adequate. So we've determined it needs to be increased. This is kind of the operational, kind of the chart of the operational issues that we've seen. These are a lot of the operational terms, which I'm not that familiar with, but we will issue alerts to the member utilities of, we think loads are going to be really high this day, and our wind forecast shows that wind's not going to be there, or we're having really high outages on the conventional system. And so these have been 2019 in particular, I think, was kind of the first time we saw, this really operational issue. It's increased. It's continued. Excuse me. In the last, the last few years, but 2019 was really when it started hitting us hard from an operational perspective, and of course that was on our mind as we were doing our latest loss of load expectation study.
So, Charles, if I can jump in again, as we look at this graph, the importance of this graph is conservative operations is a term that we use that just to say we're having problems. The thing about this graph that shows what we're encountering is when you get to a resource alert or an EA 1, 2, or 3, those are pretty serious events within a regulatory environment. So even though 2019 looks very, very bad because of your conservative operations of 598 that year, where it really gets concerning is, as you see in 2021, that was when the Winter Storm Uri was, you had resource alerts of 332 hours and then EA 1, 2, and 3 events. It's just showing the severity. We're seeing more of those than we did in the past as we go through those operational opportunities.
Were any of those 2021 EA events not related to Uri?
I don't believe so.
I
think they were all during that.
So that whole,
I think they were all during Uri.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Charles.
Yeah, the after 2019, I think they reclassified the conservative operations into the resource alert. So that's why it kind of split. There's not as many conservative operations in the subsequent years, and they kind of changed the definition there. But yeah, that's right. Yeah, most of these issues, emergency alerts, are that's the worst. EEA 3 is when load is dropped. That all happened in 2021.
Yeah, the one thing I would add is the conservative ops and the resource alerts. Those are SPP terminology that are managed through our operating criteria. When you start getting into the EEAs, those are NERC operating that everybody has to abide by system-wide.
So the SPP staff, we do a loss of load expectation study every 2 years to set the hopefully to verify the planning reserve margin that we have is good, or to set a new planning reserve margin. So the study that was started in 2021, we didn't finish it until this past spring. We looked at several assumptions. We talked about the outages that we're expecting, demand response. So we ran a lot of scenarios there to kind of capture anything that we thought we needed to. All of the results showed us that with today's conditions, the 12% reserve margin is no longer adequate. So the scenarios, they range from 13% to 18%. The 18% values, those were, well, let's look at, holding back additional operating reserves in reserve to kind of help with the wind volatility. So that's where those on the higher end were. But we determined that, the 15% did capture all of the planning needs, and it did allow for a little bit of operational as well. So there was a general acceptance with the stakeholder group that we needed to get to 15% on our planning reserve margin. Now there was differences in the stakeholder community as to how soon we needed to get there. So there were competing proposals to stair step to get to 15 over 3 years. Staff, we just due to these operational alerts that we've seen, we stated we needed to get to 15%, as soon as possible. So the proposal that staff took was to raise the PRM for the 2023 summer season to 15%. The MOPSI, where we first took this to, they pretty much, I think, stuck with the transition, over 3 years. Staff, we stuck with our original proposal, which was supported by the RSC and the board of directors. As you can see there in the members committee, there was some opposition and some abstentions there. So that is the PRM, and I think that's the last slide. So any questions?
And again, appreciate the time today, and happy to come back anytime and update y'all on whatever you'd like to hear about, SPP wise.
Okay. Any questions from commissioners on the phone?
None from me.
No questions,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Rodney, Walt, you guys want to provide any commentary or anything?
Thank you. Yes. I just wanted to say that you talked a great deal about the planning reserve margin needing to go up. That's a very contentious issue among the stakeholders. There's a lot of pushback against it. Nobody's arguing with the number that they're suggesting. They are arguing about how quickly SPP thinks that we need to achieve that value, and how quickly the utilities do. It's an element that tends to quantify how we manage the risk in the system. And I think everybody recognizes that with the changes in resources, the resource adequacy is, at this point in time, something bordering on more risk rather than less, and we need to pay attention to that.
Yeah, there was proposals to do stair step approaches and different things, but we opted just to.
And we are with our board of directors. They gave us a directive to also go look at a waiver process to try to help the implementation of that 15%. So we got a group working on that. See what that would look like.
And the other thing, just to try to, they crush it on wind. You guys know how to forecast wind. You've been doing it so long. There's so much wind on this system that you're day ahead, you're 2 day ahead. I mean, you guys have gotten it down to, you're usually just right there, and what you predict is what usually happens. And you set peaks of 84% of your load has been served by wind, and it's on certain days and stuff. So they've really carved out an expertise on that piece.
Yeah, I remember when I came to SPP in 2007, 2008, one of the first projects I worked on was a wind integration task force. I think we had three gigs of wind on the system, and we were trying to figure out in the next 10 years how we were going to get to 10 gig, operationally, what all things that we have to do. And now we're sitting at 31,000 megawatts of wind on the system. So it's really grown. It's been crazy.
Yep. All right. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you.
Other questions? Great. All right, that just leaves us with scheduling. So, looking ahead, the evidentiary hearing that we're in right now is done for the day. We just took opening statements. That was in ER 2022-0129. That's Evergy Metro's request for general rate increase. But that hearing continues through Friday, September 9th. So that's every day in room 310, beginning at 8:30 a.m. with Judge Hatcher. Again, today we are done for the day, though. Monday, September 5th is obviously a state holiday. It's Labor Day. Wednesday, September 7th, we'll have agenda at 10:15 a.m. Sunday, September 11th through Wednesday, September 14th is the National Water Summit. Monday, September 12th, we have a local public hearing in WA 2022-0311. That's Missouri American Water Company's application for a CCN in and around the city of Stewartsville. That will be via WebEx only at 6 p.m. with Judge Hatcher. Wednesday, September 14th, we have agenda at 10:15 a.m. Thursday, September 15th, local public hearing in EO 2022-0332. That's Como Electric Cooperative and Ameren's application for an order approving a territorial agreement in Cooper, Cole, and Montauk counties. That will be via WebEx at 6 p.m. with Judge Clark. Wednesday, September 21st, we currently have agenda scheduled at 10:15 a.m., but I would suggest moving that to Thursday that week. So Thursday the 22nd, because of FRI, and I think many commissioners will be participating in FRI up in Columbia, Missouri. So we'll get with everybody and make sure that that works for everyone before then. And then Wednesday, September 28th, we have agenda at 10:15 a.m. So that gets us out through the end of September. Any comments, questions, or requests regarding scheduling? All right, hearing none, and with no other business coming before the body, we will stand adjourned. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.